Hello, Tyne! Today I want to talk about how I write lovable characters, how I create a story based around a character because I always come up with the characters first, and other ways that you can really flesh out a character that is going to be sustainable for you to write for an entire novel, or a short story, or whatever you want to write. The very first thing that I do is I start with a main emotion that I want the character to feel. This is like their driving force and what the one consistent thing throughout the novel is going to be. I get this a lot from different animes that I've watched and TV shows where the thing that people latch onto the most is how the character reacts to specific situations, and that comes out in the specific emotion that they'll always go to whenever they're threatened, whenever they're sad, scared. They always go back to putting on the specific front. So I try to get centered, focus on what that emotion feels like, and then go from there. It can be really hard to name the emotion or come up with really how to express the feeling inside yourself, and so I like to turn it into a phrase rather than just name some kind of obscure emotion. So for my main character that I'm currently writing, it's I'm trying my best, and it's said in a kind of sad, scared way, a very defensive way, and that's something that I have come up a lot as he's really trying his best but keeps failing, things keep happening, and then overall he does kind of teeter in this area of being afraid and being sad at a lot of different points. You could also have an excited main character, an angry main character, just coming up with kind of the phrase that you want to have associated with them. And this phrase, this saying, this emotion is something that I usually or almost always turn into a turning point. It can either be when the character first is given the call to action and has to accept the plot. It can be during the plot twist, during the climax. At any different high emotional point in your book is where I like to have this phrase either turn up or come to its final fruition. So during the Dark Night of the Soul, I have my character actually specifically say, I'm trying my best. He's in tears, his head's hanging low, and I like to envision when I'm first coming up with the idea of the plot, kind of some characters that would be around him, who he'd be saying it to, some different situations, and emotionally impacting places to have this come up. Then I like to come up with the look of the character, how the character moves, what the character looks like when they're saying it, kind of some physical actions to go along with it. And this is a way to get me out of just describing and turn it into a more realistic way of describing things to get the reader more interested in the story. For instance, having the body tightly curled, having the person sprawled out, different facial expressions, kind of the way that they say the word, really focusing in on this specific character point is the way that I then go to expand upon everything else about how the character looks like, any of their physical traits like hair color, eye color, skin color, the way that they speak, if they have a certain accent, if they're from a different country, if they're from the south, if they're from the north, wherever it might be, if they're from a different planet. And then I go on to expand upon the characters that he's talking to. Is this the villain? Is this their window character? Who exactly are they talking to? What's the situation around it? What does that secondary character look like? And maybe how do they respond? And by really fleshing out this scene, I get a good idea of either where I'm starting my book or where I'm ending my book, and then I can build upon it around this scene. So if it's towards the end of the book, I can say, what is the most emotionally impactful thing that can happen before this to really turn this scene into something even more emotional where the reader can really feel the same amount as the character. Whereas if it's the beginning or the call to action or anything like that, I can say, what can I write from here that if a reader were to come through and read it the second time, they would get even more meaning out of it. And then I also use this emotion to develop symbols and reoccurring imagery that I can have come back throughout the novel to kind of remind the character of either where they started or symbolize or give a red herring maybe, or anything about where the plot is going to go. And so having a specific object, maybe when my character says, I'm trying my best, he's holding on to something, or he's pointing at something, or there's some kind of imagery in the background. And I think one of the main things that can set characters apart and really show you their differences and make them into their own is really the way that they move and how you describe their actions. So I have a character that I call the Red-Eyed Raven, and that's not his name, of course, it's just a nickname, but I describe a lot of things that he does with terms that you would use for birds, because of course raven you know the connection. But you can also have your character, since their predominant motion might be meek, then you can have them move shyly, have them looking down a lot, and kind of keep that character in the one way of being described. Whereas the other character, a more confident character, a more relaxed character, you would have an entirely different set of words to describe. And this is one of the best ways to really separate characters and make them into their own. So I hope you found this helpful. I'll see you guys again next week. Bye bye.